Hello, hello. My name is Linda, also known as Tortajala around the internet, and I love creative journaling and all things stationery. And today I wanted to show you a comparison of the two different six-hole punchers that I have for punching inserts to add into your ring binders. If you use any kind of ring-bound planner, I'm sure that at some point you're going to need to punch an insert, a printout, or maybe even a piece of ephemera or a photo to add in. Unless you always buy pre-made inserts, at some point you're going to want to have that tool with you. And you can use existing pages as a guide and just use like a single hole puncher if you already have one of those. But most people seem to buy this mini Rapesco punch for home use. It's really popular and it's pretty much like the only one that I saw, like watching videos and things like that, when I first got into ring planners. It seemed like everyone had this, and they say it's the best, no issues, unless you're going into the very like industrial type that can punch, lots and lots of pages. This punch is definitely meant for like home use. It's advertised to have like a 10 sheet capacity, but of course that's not always true because it just depends on the thickness of the paper that you are using. You don't really know how many sheets it can punch cleanly, so you probably always want to punch less sheets at a time if possible so that you get like a clean hole punch. In that way, like, I think it just saves you the headache of like mispunching and ruining inserts. It just takes a few more seconds. So back to this punch, like this little punch, it's advertised as an adjustable six-hole punch. And for sizes like A5, A6, mini, pocket, personal, slimline, compact, and agenda, I don't even know what those sizes mean, but it pretty much seemed like, hey, it covers everything. It has good reviews. Pretty much everyone that I see seems to have it. So I just automatically thought, okay, this is the basic tool, so just go with it. And when I first started out, it was perfect. I had personal size ring binders, pocket, and then eventually mini. And so obviously, this hole punch works for all of that without issue. You just have to remember to adjust here the holes, like you go to the right setting that says it's for personal or pocket or mini, and it works fine. No issues, just really simple. Put your sheets in, punch, and you've got everything set up. I will include links to Amazon where I bought these in a pinned comment below if you're interested, but I have noticed that the price sort of fluctuates all the time. If you don't need it immediately, I always tell people you should leave things like in your cart on Amazon because then you can buy it just when the price drops, because yeah, it's really weird that it seems to change constantly. I don't know, I think it should be like $10, $15 max. So this Rapesco punch, and it's a metal tool and it does have this sliding mechanism here so that you can lock it like pressed down, which is helpful if you're trying to keep it like as compact as possible for storage, or also like if you actually do bring this with you, like on the go in a bag or something like that because you need it. For me, it wasn't really a major issue because it's just in a drawer in my desk, so it doesn't really matter that I'm saving like a couple centimeters, but the feature is there and it works as expected. You set the sizing, you put the paper in, you punch, and the excess paper bits are stored in this bottom, like little pocket that's covered by this little plastic piece. And you can, of course, open it up and just empty it out in the trash every now and again. This bottom area also has a slide out piece, and this is made of plastic, but basically it has the page sizes marked off so that you could use it as a guide for your paper when you're punching like personal size and things like that. So this is where the issue pops up for me personally. It worked fine and it still works for the sizes that I mentioned, but when I moved up and started to use an A5 ring size binder, that's when things changed for me personally. I obviously wasn't paying attention to all the details when I bought this because I, again, just assumed that everybody had it and it must work. So, I didn't really think of all the use cases. It's supposed to be adjustable, right? And it says it works for all the sizes. But the thing is, for the A5 size, you're actually only punching 3 holes at a time because this is a compact sized punch, right? By the size of the punch itself. You cannot extend these sets of like hole punches out far enough to actually punch all 6 holes of an A5 page. So to punch the A5 size, you actually have to slide out the little guide here to the A5 guide, and then you're punching the first 3 holes of the piece of paper, and then you have to flip it over and punch the other 3 holes on the other side of the paper. So it does take 2 steps for the A5 size instead of one. And it's not that it doesn't work. It's just that you do have to be pretty precise because you're punching these 3 holes separately, right? So if you're off by a few millimeters because you scrunched your paper or you're just like a little off, those punched holes will be slightly off, and it shouldn't be a huge deal, but if they are a little off, they can rub against your rings when you're like flipping the pages, so it makes the page turning experience less smooth. And obviously, maybe this is like a user error kind of thing, but like I make mistakes more often than not. It would be way better if it just punched all 6 holes at the same time because even if I'm off because I've aligned it, maybe a couple millimeters off, the holes themselves, like all 6 holes, are in the right place, if that makes sense. So your page, when you stack up a bunch of them, they might seem like they're off, but they're still going to fit in the binder properly and they're still going to flip properly because those holes are punched in the right place. And so I just had this issue of always being like a millimeter or whatever, off here and there. And it was just annoying. Like it came up often enough that it was annoying. And so I'm not, so picky that all the pages in my binder have to line up perfectly in the corners, like the way that manufactured inserts obviously are like perfectly sized. But I just don't like it when the holes are a little off. And then when you're flipping, you feel that it's not smooth. You know what I mean? So I had that issue with, working with A5 binders. And I increasingly at that time was moving up in size and having more A5 binders. So it was just annoying. Like it got annoying enough that oftentimes I wouldn't even use this punch when I need to do A5 pages because it was easier just to use a guide, an existing page as a guide, and just punch each hole with a single hole puncher. And not have to deal with this whole flippity flip thing and making sure everything would work out. And that is only because I already have a craft punch that can go through like a huge amount of pages as well, single hole punch. But again, sometimes you can still be off because the diameter of this craft punch, like hole, is not the same. So, whatever. I lived with it. It's not the end of the world. It's really just an annoyance more than anything. But then it got to the point where it was sort of like a deal breaker because I started using my A5 binders for creative pages. And that meant that my pages were not always A5, if that makes sense. Like they would not necessarily be perfect A5 pages. They might be a little bigger or a little smaller, or if you add ephemera or different sized pages in a binder. So when you're doing that, it just got to be really annoying because if you need to punch only 3 holes at a time, let's say you want to punch a piece that uses like 3 holes on the bottom, but like two at the top. But the paper itself is not A5 sized. So you'd have to use a guide to do the whole flip method and like figure out, if the holes are being punched in the right place. Again, which is why it was just more confusion to actually use the punch than just have a guide and do the single. punches. But then I realized at some point through all of this confusion and stuff that there actually exists the same kind of punch, but just larger, meaning the sets of holes, you can actually set them to A5 as well as all the other sizes, personal, A6, mini, all that kind of stuff. So the Rapesco punch, this one that is so popular, is like considered the mini, right? Because it's more portable, takes up less space, that kind of thing. But I, in the beginning, should have just bought the A5 version if I knew I was going to be using that, obviously, because it punches all six holes at the same time. And essentially, it is the same like mechanism, the same punch, everything. It's just larger so that you can fit an A5 size piece of paper and punch all six holes at the same time. So what I have here is actually an off-brand. Again, I found it on Amazon. It's called Worklion, and if you look at the measurements, because sometimes the pictures are sort of misleading, you don't know how big it really is, but if you look at the measurements, it obviously is much larger. It has the same like three sets of hole punches, but you can adjust them for exactly, A5 size, personal size, mini, all of that kind of stuff. And I only realized later on that even Rapesco makes a version like this as well. It's obviously more expensive because of the name brand and everything, and it's bigger, but they do have that version. So my personal problems were solved just having the larger version of the six hole punch rather than the mini portable one. Because for my purposes, I actually do use all of the sizes of the punch. And so it's just interesting to note, like for me personally, I was thinking about it, how this sort of annoyance, pet peeve is just so easily solved by upgrading my tool because I do use it quite often, and just upgrading the tool solved all the issues. And I don't know why I didn't know about this to begin with, and that's why I wanted to share this and show you the different options because I see the mini Rapesco punch like everywhere rather than the bigger A5 size. For some reason, when I first got into ring planners, I didn't obviously go deeper in the research and just bought the first thing that would do the job. But it goes to show that it does perhaps make sense to do a little bit more thinking and consider like all the use cases before you actually, buy the tool that you think that you want. So this off-brand version is by Worklion, and I'm sure there are many others as well, but it pretty much looks exactly like the same mechanism, like they're probably, I wonder if they're all made like from the same people at the end of the day in terms of, manufacturing. But again, the difference really is just that it is bigger so that you can punch all six holes for an A5 page. And again, this matters for me because if you are especially punching ephemera or other page sizes, you just want to put it in and like punch all six holes. You don't need to have an exactly A5 size piece of paper because otherwise the guides, they still wouldn't work. You know what I mean? If you had a paper that was like a different size. I hope that it was helpful to see these two side by side and just know that there are other options out there. And if you live in Europe and like other places, there are other brands, especially like craft companies. They do have a lot of different punches. So there are more options out there than you think. So it might help to just do, some searches and things like that online to really figure out what is the one that is the most useful for you. I would have definitely wanted to know that in the beginning because in terms of price difference, it costs practically the same. For the larger one, unless you do buy the brand name Rapesco one. But if you are like shopping on a site like Amazon, it probably will go on sale at some point. So it really isn't that much in terms of price to get like the bigger size if you're not worried about like portability or storage. And, this one doesn't this off-brand, it doesn't have that little button thing that locks it closed, but if you put it back in the box, I mean, it closes it up a little smaller if you were concerned about that. But that is the only really major difference. Everything else seems to be exactly the same in terms of, these punch holes that you can swap around. The hole punch like pieces are in this bottom sort of container area. There is like a guide as well. So they're essentially the same. They're just different sizes, obviously, to accommodate the types of pages or inserts that you actually need to punch. So I hope you found this useful. I just wanted to share that. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.